Hey everyone, and welcome to the Explainer. So, if you're a developer just diving into the open Clinica codebase, this one's for you. We're going to break down one of the most critical components you'll absolutely need to get your head around, the data entry servlet. So, what exactly is this thing at its core? Well, it's a Java servlet that's basically doing two massive jobs. It shows data entry forms to users, and then it processes all the data they send back. You can pretty much think of it as the main hub for, well, almost all the clinical data that gets into the system.
Let's use an analogy to make this super clear. Picture it like an air traffic controller, but for data entry. It's managing all the incoming flights, that's your data submissions, and all the outgoing ones, which are the forms being displayed. It's got to make sure every piece of information is valid and lands safely in the right spot in the database. No crashes allowed.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to follow the journey of a single user request from start to finish. We're going to look at its role as the data hub, the anatomy of a request, that big display versus submit decision, how it validates input, saves the data, and then finally, where it sends you next. All right, let's get into it. All right, first up, the data entry hub. Now, to get its role, you gotta know this isn't just some random class. It's an abstract class. And what that means for us as developers is that it's the foundational blueprint for a whole bunch of different data entry scenarios. We're talking initial entry, double data entry for that extra quality check, even administrative edits. It's providing the core logic that all these other workflows are built on top of. Super foundational. So yeah, its responsibilities are huge. It basically covers the entire lifecycle of a data entry interaction. I mean, look at this list. It's rendering the forms, grabbing the user's input, validating it against all the business rules, saving the good stuff to the database, and even handling where the user goes next. It is a total workhorse, doing all the heavy lifting so other parts of the app don't have to. Okay, so we know what it's supposed to do, but how does it know what to do on any given request? Let's dig into the anatomy of a request and see what kind of info it's getting. So, how does it get its marching orders? It's not magic, right? It's all about these public static final string constants. It uses these to read specific parameters straight from the HTTP request. You'll see things like input event CRF ID. That tells it which specific form instance we're dealing with. Then you've got input section ID, which is like, hey, show me this specific section of that form. These parameters are literally the commands telling the servlet exactly what to do. Okay, section 3. This is a big one. Display versus submit logic. This is probably the most critical decision the servlet has to make right off the bat. Is this user just asking to look at a form, or are they actually trying to submit new data? Two totally different paths. So right inside its main process request method, the code hits this fork in the road. It splits into one of two paths. If it's a display request, its job is to go fetch existing data from the database to pre-fill the form, then hand it off to a JSP to get rendered for the user. But if it's a submission, it does the opposite. It completely ignores what's in the database, grabs the new values from the user's request, and then puts that data through the ringer with validation before even thinking about saving it. And check this out. This single line of code. This is the whole decision right here. It all boils down to one Boolean variable, is submitted. This little guy is the switch of the tracks that sends the whole process down one path or the other. It's so simple, but man, is it powerful. Okay, so let's follow the submit path. Let's say is submitted came back true. The servlet can't just blindly save that data. No way. First, that data has to run a gauntlet of really tough checks. And that brings us to section 4, validating user input. This isn't just one check, it's a whole process designed to make sure the data is clean. First, it literally loops through every single item and group that was submitted. Then, for each piece of data, it throws the core validators at it, things like the discrepancy validator and rule validator. It's also smart enough to validate items that only appeared because of some conditional logic. And if anything fails, anything at all, it gets collected into this errors map. Nothing slips through the cracks. And here's the crucial part, if that validation gauntlet finds even one single error, if that errors map isn't empty, the whole save operation is aborted. It just stops. The process just stops dead, and boom, the user is sent right back to the form they were on, but this time with big, clear error messages showing them exactly what went wrong and what they need to fix. Okay, but let's be optimistic. Let's say our data was perfect. It passed all the checks. What happens next? Well, now the servlet's job is to make it permanent, and that means it's time for section 5, saving that data to the database. Now, this isn't just one simple save command. It's a really careful, multi-stage transaction. First, it updates some metadata on the event CRF bean, which is kind of the object for the form itself. Then, it loops through every single one of those validated items and calls a write-to-DB method on each one to create or update the records. And to wrap it all up, it updates the parent study event bean to show that changes have been made. It's super systematic, making sure the whole data model stays consistent. And this right here is where you really see the complexity of what this servlet is juggling. To get that save operation done, this one single servlet is talking to more than 15 different data access objects, DAOs. And each of those DAOs handles a different part of the database. So think about that. For just one form submission, the data entry servlet is the master coordinator, orchestrating writes across over a dozen different database tables. It's pretty amazing. All right, we're almost there. That brings us to our final section. The data is saved, it's safe in the database, but the servlet has one last job to do: figure out where to send the user now. Let's talk about navigating to the next step. The navigation logic is actually pretty clever. It just checks which button the user pressed. Click Previous or Next. It sends you to the right section, no surprise there. Save and Exit takes you back to the event details page. Simple enough. But here's the really cool part. Let's say a user enters a value that triggers a rule, and that rule makes a hidden item appear on the very same page. The servlet is smart enough to just reload the current section so that new item shows up instantly. It's all about making that user workflow as smooth as possible. So there you have it. That's the entire journey of a request, from the moment it hits the server to the moment the user is sent to their next screen, all handled by the data entry servlet. And by understanding this flow, the request, that big display versus submit decision, the validation, the save, the navigation, you now have a solid mental model of how this thing works. This is going to make it so much easier to debug problems or even add new features. Which kind of leaves us with one last question for you to chew on. Now that you know the whole flow, where would you stick a hook to log every single data change? To create a rock-solid audit trail? It's a cool thought exercise, and it really gets you thinking about how you can build on top of what this powerful servlet already does.